I just had to consent to be recorded.
Did you?
Mm,
Oh, that's new.
yeah.
Did you?
If I've not, then what are we doing here?
Well, I had to
Yes, I did.
ask.
You did, yeah, and you have, and I hope you're happy.
Yeah. So,
Ah,
hello and welcome. I'm Scott.
I'm Loz.
Ergo, we are Scott and Loz, and this is
The Scott Loz Show. Two dicks talking bollocks.
So, Loz, how are you?
Oh, I am spankingly good, old chap. How about yourself?
Not too bad, man. We missed our recording session last week, didn't we?
And
I mean,
the week before, actually, I think we've been slacking.
at the time of recording this, I think episode 13 has gone live, but 14
Yes.
hasn't. I don't know why that matters, but yeah, you and I had some time off for recording for the first time in a while, really. So,
yeah.
What sort of shenanigans did you get up to, of which you're allowed to tell us?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I've been working and not working and walking the dog. It's been good. I must say I enjoyed the last AEW wrestling pay-per-view because the last two sort of events they'd done, they unfortunately managed to sort of leave a bit of a sour taste in the mouth. And I thought that this one was much more a return to form. And I have to say, an absolutely glorious return of the live crowd because, of course, obviously, with Corona conditions in place, then it's been sort of like the trainee wrestlers on the outside. So getting that full crowd in and the chants and the singing and all the rest of it. Yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed it. That's probably, as sad as it sounds, my highlight of 2 weeks. How about yourself, Hughes?
I've had quite an up and down fortnight, really. I mean, with a very distinct up and sorry, adjusting my microphone there if that was heard, and a very distinct down, I'd say, both of which have almost been like vying to be the story of the week, as it were, or whatever. But well, what you were just talking about there with wrestling and crowds being back and stuff like that. I mean, I'll just talk about the up, shall I, of my past fortnight. And I cannot believe I'm saying this. Brentford are in the Premier League. Now, I know I mentioned the playoff semi-final against Bournemouth in a previous episode. And, well, since then, we beat Swansea in the final. And yeah, so good to have fans back, like you say, and at Wembley. And just, I must say, to any Swansea fans listening, it was especially satisfying to beat you again, to be honest, because because of how much your fans and indeed manager have been just giving it the big un and really seem to have it in for Thomas Frank for no reason at all. In fact, to be frank, I think he's shown far more humility and indeed respect towards Swansea than Steve Cooper did in our direction. And as such, not only did we really want to win, I think every neutral wanted us to as well. And so, hey, we did everyone proud.
I mean, they're a far cry from the fairly sort of free-flowing, if not fragile, Swansea team that I sort of had some respect for under Roberto Martinez. They're
cynical, negative. I mean, unfortunately, most footballers have a tendency to be melodramatic.
To flop about on the floor like a fish out of water.
Yeah, and I hate seeing our players do it. There's one player in particular that does do it from time to time. But I think just our kind of philosophy in general is much more one that people can get behind, fans of genuine sport and stuff. I'm sorry, yeah, I agree with you. I thought Swansea were a breath of fresh air when they first went up to the Premier League and played, some great football. And these days, I'm sorry. And just the fans as well. It's like, I don't know, is it just a new generation of Swansea fans just happen to be, sorry to say it, pond life on the whole? I think some Swansea fans, because they've been in the Premier League, therefore they must be a bigger club and have more right to be back there. Sorry, bollocks. You're talking bollocks.
Brentford are a great little club, I have to say. It's taking you to spotlight them from what you appreciate it, but I do have a special place in my heart for the Bees. I'm really pleased for everyone associated with the club.
I just want to check at this point that we've insulted some of our listeners as usual, Loz. Yep, excellent.
Yeah.
No, I mean, seriously, it hasn't sunk in yet that, like you say, Little Brentford are in the big time. And I hope it never does sink in, really. By the time this episode goes live, the fixture list will be out, actually, and maybe it will sink in then. Who knows? And also,
I hope they managed to get almost like a comical ringer, like somebody like Ronaldo, like cancels his contract to Juventus and sort of goes, "Oh, go on, I like London, go on, I'll play for free."
I've got a sneaking suspicion we might get Ben Rama back on a season loan. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, that'd be a good move.
Quickly want to stay with football here because, like I was saying, by the time this episode goes live, the Premier League fixture list will be out, but also the Euros will be in swing by then, won't they?
And God knows nobody gives a monkeys.
Well, I was going to say, if I can be honest once more and potentially insult other listeners, especially if Gareth Southgate's one of them, I'm sorry. I just don't give a toss when it comes to the England football team. I've been so spoiled with Brentford over the past few years, not least because of their sort of attractive style of play and indeed the story of the club. And I just see the opposite when I look at this England side.
But for me personally, as I actually have the most goodwill for this England team than I have had for some time. But I've just been burned so many times with England that after Iceland and that whole debacle, I'm afraid, much like I had to do with previously beloved Aston Villa, I still, again, wish the team well. I had to remove myself from the situation because it just wasn't worth it anymore.
The only one who really seems to care about putting on an England shirt is Ollie Watkins, formerly of Brentford and now at Aston Villa. And he sadly was overlooked for the squad. But anyway, look, good luck, England. I'm not saying any of this for lack of patriotism, but rather just almost their seeming lack of patriotism. And the insipid brand of football, despite the wealth of riches attacking-wise we currently have, their clubs seem to matter more. And that's partially what bothers me, I guess. Thankfully, we've got plenty of cricket this summer to enjoy instead.
Oh, goody.
But yes, as you say, we're not here to discuss sport. For we shall dedicate our own series, or at least an episode or something to that in the future.
Oh, yeah.
Shall we not?
We shall indeed.
We are currently deep into our series on music and our top 10 albums. And we've done 10 and 9. And then the last episode was 8 and 7. And so what does that make today, boys and girls?
It's 6, 5, and 4.
Well, yeah, I suppose we're going to try and include, because that's Sesame Street, isn't it? Today's episode is brought to you by S&L.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 prostitutes.
No, so I mean, yeah, we're going to do 6 and 5, but I think we'll see how we do in terms of time. But I think we should try and squeeze 4 in as well, because then that, of course, would mean that the next episode is a top 3 again. Which who doesn't want to hear a top 3? I don't want to tune in for a top 2 or a top 4. Sorry, we've done our 10 and 9, we've done our 8 and 7, and let's see how long this one lasts, I guess, and we'll just go from there.
All right, let's go.
So, Losington, over to you. Number 6. I believe your number 6 in films was Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
God, I'm more sure of it than you.
Why is that relevant? Okay, yeah.
Because that was your number 6 film, and this is your number 6 album. I'm not saying the two are going to be related.
I was going to say that they don't knit together particularly well, but there we go.
Well,
yeah, my Jurassic Park of albums is Cheers by Obi Trice.
Okay.
Now, this is almost. I might almost describe rap as a guilty pleasure, but if ever there was an album I was probably going to suggest as a guilty pleasure on this list, it would be this one. But actually, in terms of some of the more, Kendrick's album is really sort of worthy and definitely one of the few albums
which I've really been enjoying, by the way.
Yeah, so I understand.
Yeah, I've listened to it a couple of times now. I think it's great. I've gone back and listened to the predecessor and the successor as well. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to take it away from what you're saying, but I did just want to say, yeah, Kendrick Lamar to Pimp a Butterfly, love it.
Yeah, I thought you might, and I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that you've liked his other work, but it does seem that each individual album has its own sort of living space, and it changes with each sort of thing, But which I
just gravitate
the quality
towards.
and like I say, the the choosing, I know he sort of tours with a live band, and which is very, very different to a lot of rappers. Anyway, in comparison to people like Kendrick, where it's like the whole album is meant to be listened to front to back, almost like as a whole thing. And whereas Obi Trice, I mean, he is. You may remember when Eminem came out, he had D12 his group, and
Yes.
basically after he'd seen sort of their success, he came and approached Eminem, and he'd sort of been part of the same sort of Detroit battle rap arena as Eminem and D12 had, and sort of said, hey, I think he wanted to be in D12, and they were like, no, we kind of sorted there. But he apparently Eminem sort of went, okay, if you show me what you got, sort of thing. Literally, like, put him straight on the spot, and he came out with a freestyle that was impressed him as much that he apparently agreed to sign him there and then.
Wow.
And then basically he's always been a favorite of mine. I've looked out for him, but this is very much sort of the peak of his career, and it's his debut album as well. So God bless him. I love you, Obi, but this was probably as good as it got for you, mate. But there's some big songs on this. There was a lot of features. I think he got a few Dr. Dre tracks, which is always good. I mean,
when you say that, do you mean Dr. Dre produced those tracks, or that he appeared on like some Dr. Dre tracks?
Both, actually.
Okay. Because this is what I mean about sometimes the producer is as big a name as the artist, and it's like,
oh, sure.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, sorry, continue.
Well, I mean, there's stuff like the setup featuring Nate Dogg, which is such a tune.
That rings a bell. I must have heard that.
And I know for a fact that Ace particularly likes got some teeth, which is a great one.
That rings a bell as well. I must have heard this album.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this is, if I'm right, I think it's 2003. So it was on the back of that whole sort of Eminem 50 Cent wave of sort of rap popularity. I feel like I'm almost repeating myself, but Obi Trice is fun. Not necessarily like all of his songs are funny, but like some of his frames of reference and word choices can be quite humorous. And I almost feel reductive, but it's you just, I think a lot of people are going to recognize a few of these samples. And if I can just read my own writing, personally, I think I've already mentioned it, but I recommend the setup featuring Nate Dogg. It's a real iconic song from the time. And as soon as I hear that song, obviously I think Obi Trice, but I also think of this album. And I think it was one of the better sellers at the time, because this was in and around the time I think G-Unit had just started to do like their own sort of individual albums as well. So there was a lot coming from Aftermath in the charts at the time. But Obi Trice, really sort of individual, unique guy, and worth a listen. Obviously, give it a spin.
Well, I've definitely heard the setup, and I've definitely heard Got Some Teeth. The moment you mentioned that song name, I was like, yeah, I've heard that. So this. Well, I don't mean to insult your vocal capabilities, but that didn't bring it back for me. But I've made a note, and I shall go off and listen to it after this, and maybe have a somewhat not suppressed, but just some part of my past listening to this album's just been forgotten. So,
well, I think another one which I swear actually we've talked about in the past is there's a track 15 on the album called "Oh" featuring Busta Rhymes. Is almost got like I always thought almost like a Christmassy sort of like jingly sort of like bell in the background, which is odd for gangster rap. I know it's not a Christmas song, but it's just the chorus is hilarious. Oh, when I'm coming out running up with dirty rifle. Oh,
yes, yeah, that rings a bell. You doing that? Yeah, I've heard that. I must have listened to this whole album, probably with you, and I hope you're not offended. I just don't remember.
No. Yeah, it's a full of sort of fun songs as well as sort of like credible rap. Yeah, I feel like I'm almost running out of steam, but that's I'm a man of my word. And that's what it is, man.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go off. I don't know why. I wasn't really, again, like with films, I wasn't kind of trying to predict what you'd put in this top 10. I'll just, like I say, I'm not the type to try and do that. I prefer to just sit back and then, subsequently be sort of surprised along the way.
Interestingly enough, sorry to jump on you. I know I think you just got a foothold there, but just as I'm looking at the producer credits, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Get with
5,
the Wicked.
6, 7.
Sorry, I had to do that.
1, 2, 3, 4. Get it with the Wicked.
What is it? All beer runs the shore.
Yeah.
In fact, doesn't he say
RB?
Oh, RB.
No, it's RB. Richard Blackwood.
Wouldn't it have been great if it was OB, because that would have been so perfect? But yeah, RB, of course. Yeah.
For now. Christ, that's killed me dead in my right. Eminem has produced almost all of this album. And the only ones that aren't produced by Eminem, Dr. Dre and Mr. Porter and Timbaland. But I mean, Mr. Porter is a member of D12, so it's essentially like the whole album is Em and Dre and Timbaland, one song Timbaland.
Mr. Porter, was that actually like his name?
It's his producer title. He's actually Denon. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's like Denuaun. Denon.
Okay.
So it's Denon, Conniver, Proof, Bizarre.
Oh, Bizarre, yeah, I remember Bizarre.
Swifty McVeigh, and Eminem, obviously. There we go. I've done myself proud.
Yeah. Well, let's get you on Mastermind immediately.
Oh, Christ. I've already been humiliated enough in my life without that.
I had an audition for Mastermind. But anyway, that's going off road again, isn't it?
What was the subject? Go on.
Well, no, the thing is, I didn't get round the audition stage because they clearly had applicants. So it was general knowledge, and I thought I was going to do well because question 1 was like, with which species does the male typically carry the pregnancy through? And I was like, oh well, I actually know this. It's seahorses. So I thought, oh, this is going to all come off for me. And then the next
one question in, look, I'm fucking smashing this guy.
Yeah, I know. I just thought, oh, this is a quirk of fate. I'm just going to fluke my way through this. My general knowledge is pretty decent on the whole, but no, some of the stuff that came up, I was just like, next. And clearly I didn't quite do well enough. My chosen subject would have probably been extras at the time. Maybe not so much now. There's a hint of what's to come in a future series. I'm not saying it's my number 1 because, drumroll please, it isn't. But anyway, extras, Mastermind, irrelevant. So Obi Trice. What was the album called? Cheers.
Cheers, yeah.
Oh, I like it. Well, one of my favorite
albums.
One of my favorite albums basically translated to Cheers, didn't it? Which was Tack. So, is there anything else we can say about Obi Trice before we get on to sort of my number 6? Because I don't want to just dive into that if there's anything to say.
Just as I think of it, there's a couple of songs, because one of the big things in rap and sort of hip hop is beef, and everyone's heard about, and I don't mean roast beef before you start.
That's corned beef, isn't it? They all love their corned beef hash over there.
Yeah. Well, it's better on the line when you're catching carp, which is important in New York, as we all know.
Yeah.
No, so obviously everyone knows about Tupac and Biggie, and that's sort of really what kicked off this almost a need for. I mean, they say that hip hop is competitive, but there are people that go out and try and manufacture a situation. But some of it's more real than others. But yeah, this album sort of came in the midst of Eminem and 50 Cent and their sort of beef with the Murder Inc. clan, and they'd sort of got the Source magazine all tied in with that and that sort of thing. And there's a couple of diss tracks, especially a song called Shit Hits the Fan, which is, I believe it's a Dre. Let me just look it up. Yeah, Dr. Dre, he produces and features with Eminem, and the whole song is pretty much a diss to Ja Rule. And I can honestly say I've heard some Ja Rule stuff, and enough to make an informed opinion. and I was firmly in the Eminem camp when it came to all that.
I always
so
preferred
that's
Eminem. Ja Rule,
yes,
Ja Rule, funny enough, is the one I've seen live because he was in
yeah,
New York at, Peppergate. We talked about that.
yeah.
Yeah, but I always preferred Eminem. Eminem's great, and like I said, I haven't tried to think ahead about what could be in your top 10, but we've not heard the name Eminem yet, and we might. Is it fair to say we might?
I'll give it you now. It's a stone cold certainty.
Okay.
But again, a little bit like with the films and with Marvel, really, I could have probably put 2 or 3 in. And actually, I think it's far more interesting to sort of pick the best one and talk about that because it is so particularly good rather than sort of, bung in 2 or 3 and end up sort of repeating myself.
Yeah,
so anyway,
I take your point. Yeah, there's only one band that have featured twice in my top 10, and they've already featured on both occasions. And then
there's a lot to say about Radiohead as well. Let's be fair.
And then there's another band which are sort of coming up, which again I could have probably put more than one of theirs in, but I didn't. I chose their best, and hey, it is where it is on merit, just like everyone
exactly.
else. So yeah, when I say coming up, I don't necessarily mean immediately coming up. I just mean at some point in the next 6.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll draw a veil over that and sling it back to you, old boy. So what's now down 6 for you, Hughes?
Well, I cannot wait to talk about this album. But here's the interesting thing: number 6 and number 5 were sort of the 2 hardest to pin down in my list, believe it or not. Like as to which was going to be number 6 and which was going to be number 5, because I'm still not convinced I've got them placed correctly. I don't know. I mean, since we last recorded, like the last episode, Loz, they have swapped around after me listening to number 6. But then a few days later, I listened to number 5 and swapped them back. So maybe that in and of itself tells you actually that they are where they are correctly, because I've listened to both and that they've ended up at number 6 and number 5. So, and I mean, the thing is, because there's an element of shock to me that this is number 6, because I'm so passionate about this album. Like, it arguably has my favorite moment on an album. And well, yeah, here it is at where it is, number 6. And yeah, it's not for everyone. In fact, it's probably for very few, really, because it's quite possibly the most crushing album of all time. And I can think of one person listening who knows what I'm on about. Yes, Robin, it's Meshuggah, Catch 33. Like, whenever I listen to this album, I kind of think, Christ, like, this could be number 1. This genuinely could be number 1, like, in terms of how amazing it makes me feel at the time. But, having kind of walked away from the emotion of that moment and then sat back and kind of put these things together, or tried to, as I have done, it's arrived here at number 6. And I suppose I've got to be quite happy with that because I've spent enough time thinking about it. So this is a band who are like renowned for being as heavy as it gets, really. You've heard them, I'm sure, Lars, haven't you?
Oh, certainly. If not in the background with you, then and Ace indeed as well. Yes, I've definitely heard them. They are thunderous.
And I mean, yeah, we should probably touch on at least I should touch on what heaviness sort of means for me, because it can be quite an ambiguous term. Like for me, heavy is kind of like about a mood rather than just like turning the gain up to 11. I mean, I think of like King Crimson's Starless. Like, that's just the middle section of that is so foreboding and evil. This based on that, for me, is like, I don't know what I consider heavy. And funnily enough, we talked at length about Opeth's change of direction. And to compound my point, there are a couple of sections from their more recent albums which are absolutely the heaviest things they've ever done. Because again, it's that moodiness, that ominous kind of foreboding evilness, I guess. Aphex Twin's Drux in a weird way as well. I haven't got time to go into that, and I really shouldn't anyway. So, but anyway, that gives you an idea of what I kind of consider like heaviness and just like impacting in that way.
Well, just as it comes to mind, I committed the cardinal sin of stopping you mid-flow. I apologise, but I just have to get this out. Because heaviness for me is almost like, how much would this music and/or product make a nun cry?
Okay. Well, on a
Do
scale
you know what I mean?
if you want to go down that route, analogy-wise, I would sort of say this album's capable of producing roughly 5 liters at least of nun tears. Yeah, but in fact, if you want to talk about what album could make a nun cry, then this might be the album. And so there we go.
So there was Prince talking about when doves cry, and here we are talking about when nuns cry.
Yeah, quite.
Talk about a tenuous fucking link.
I like Prince, but this is Meshuggah. There's no link between the two, I'm afraid. So anyway, this feels like a long time ago now. But what I was just talking about with that sort of mood, Meshuggah do that unquestionably, but they also have that kind of that distortion as well. And also you've got the incredible, almost robotic kind of like screaming of the vocalist Jens Kidman. Like, an absolute enigma. Google him if you want to laugh, because you'll see the trademark Jens face.
The gun.
In fact, you get a lot of memes for the band like Meshuggah, but because they are just so heavy, you get many like YouTube videos where people have sort of played to this, like overdubbing them on top of Mary Poppins or whatever. Yeah, one of my personal favorites is Marcel plays Meshuggah. Marcel being the capuchin monkey from Friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you search YouTube, Marcel plays Meshuggah. Or on YouTube, how to brush your teeth to Meshuggah. You'll get the Jens face in that one as well.
Well, just purely whilst we're talking about YouTube videos and Meshuggah, I'm sorry if it's not the right album. Which is the one where they're on the tour bus? You know exactly the one I mean.
That's New Millennium
video
Cyanide.
where they're like,
that's off an earlier album called Chaos Sphere.
Sorry,
and the track is called New Millennium Cyanide Christ. But
it's a great video.
It is. It's almost as if they were given a budget and they just blew it on just beer or whatever. And then they were like, shit, well, we need to turn in something by 6 p.m. tomorrow. And they just recorded this video on their tour bus. And it's brilliant. It's such a vibe. I love it. But that's kind of a far cry from the aesthetic of this album, actually. Chaos Sphere is quite fast, quite thrashy, quite manic. And they were quite a lot younger then. Whereas by the time we get to Catch 33. But forget the brutality for a second. This band are one of the grooviest bands of all time. And this album really pulls out that groove at times, along with a couple of others. Nothing and Coloss come to mind. They've done many other great albums, which I haven't mentioned. Obson seems to be their most popular, and I can understand why. It's great. But as is often the case with me, my favourite is like the one that came just before the people's favourite. And Catch 33 was and is by far for me their masterpiece. And let me actually get on to explaining why, because we haven't talked about the album yet. Goodness sake. Hang on a second. Sorry.
Sorry, sir.
Right, so back in the game. Right, well, here's the interesting thing. Well, I'll say the interesting thing. Here's if you had to rank them, here's the number one most interesting thing to say to someone who's not heard the album before. I know you probably have, but from a listener point of view, if you know nothing of Meshuggah and subsequently Meshuggah's Catch 33, let me start by saying it's one continuous piece. Like, think of it as just one song, like a 45-minute song. It's split into segments in terms of track numbers, like 13 or 14 or something like that. But it flows seamlessly as one singular piece of music, and it's basically one track. And it starts kind of subdued in a way, I'd say. There's a lot of repetition at the start. I'd say maybe for the first 10, 15 minutes. And I think a lot of people could find that boring, monotone, But if they switch it off there, they have simply denied themselves one of the most enriching and incredible musical experiences. Because I think the purpose of that beginning is kind of to set a mood, much like in film, And once we're submerged in that mood, for the remaining, 35 minutes or something, the band just takes it to these places that this introduction was almost necessary to set up, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, the ominous build-up.
And I guess the point where one could argue that the album becomes like really, really interesting is a section called Mind's Mirrors. And it almost kind of splits the album up because it's like it starts with the pummeling of a ridiculously down-tuned bass string, I'd imagine, followed by this kind of heavily robotized voice that goes through this kind of philosophical introspection, I'd say. I mean, I don't know, one of the quotes that comes out for me or stands out for me is like, mute and blinded is to really see. I love that. But like, anyway, it's less probably about the lyrics and just that there's a melody that they've managed to work into how the voice is robotized. I mean, this isn't auto-tune. Far cry from that.
Also, just as I'm going to yet again shoehorn myself into a discussion I have no right in, I just remember when the South Park guys were doing an episode about Kanye West and the gay fish episode, and
the fish sticks,
yeah, that's right, and they were saying that they wanted to sort of try and imitate sort of some of Kanye's music to obviously put it in, because they can't just like obviously steal his music because it would sue them for copyright. And Trey Parker was talking about, I think it's Trey, was talking about using auto-tune to try and like do that, and he said it's awful because he said for starters you have to sing off key for it to trigger it. And he says so it's actually like it's a tool for unskilled singers, and he was just like,
well, you have to become skilled in being unskilled to use it. That's just the concept. That's just mental to me,
and it sounds crap anyway. Bless him. I remember when T-Pain came out, and that was like, he was pretty much like the first one to really, really use it, and that was his whole thing. And as much as I actually quite like T-Pain as a personality, my Christ, I mean, some of the most pointless money ever spent in music.
I can't fathom how makes me feel old saying the kids of today, but Christ, it's almost less that they're a different generation, an entirely different fucking species. If that's what they enjoy listening to, if that is what the kids of today enjoy listening to, I don't know what's to blame there. It could be a multitude of things. It could be our generation's fault in terms of parenting. It could be media's fault in terms of popularizing shit. And then it's the fault of the likes of Drake, who, to be fair, are probably a byproduct of the things I just talked about. So it's a complicated issue, but this is where we are today in music. Obviously, there's loads of great music around now. Of course, there still is. And that will always happen because there'll always be human beings who have intelligence and a high degree of artistry in their output and stuff. So thankfully, it'll always live on. But just more and more now, the world is saturated with the likes of this. And I mean, we talk about one of the other of my favorite podcasts, apart from this one, obviously, is the album years, where one of my musical heroes, Stephen Wilson, there's a podcast where he talks about it.
Yes.
And he has used auto-tune, or if not auto-tune, then like a derivative of, one that works slightly differently, but ultimately achieves kind of the same thing. And he said that it's fine if you use it like on a really minimal level, just to tighten up, to quantize isn't the right word because that's to do with time, but just to like tighten up. Any musical producers listening, Dr. Dre, if you're listening, you'll know the word here. But yeah, he just uses it solely just to tighten things up, just to kind of bring things to the right key. But anyway, we've just gone on a massive riff about auto-tune. Well, I mean, the reason this came up in the first place is because Mind's Mirrors on this album has this very heavy robot-like effect on the voice. But here it's like the aesthetic of the sound and how it comes out. It somehow sounds human and alien at the same time. And I guess as a result, it's almost effectively like an instrument. It's amazing the way they did it. That's how to do it. And let that be the end of any discussion on auto-tune going forward, right?
Yes.
Even though it's not auto-tune that they use there, but we all know what I'm talking about, I hope.
Yes.
And the atmosphere of this track is incredible because it sort of builds, I haven't got time, obviously, to go through this in that much detail, but there's a guitar riff that builds wonderfully ominously, as always. And then we get into the bit that I really want to talk about, if I'm being honest, with this album. That's why I'm trying to skip ahead, because I know how long I could potentially talk about this next bit for. So I guess the final 25 minutes, if you like, the second half of the album, I suppose you could say, like I say, even though it's one continuous piece, you'll know what I mean if you hear it. It's still interspersed with like quiet sections and stuff, and then bam, we go into In Death Is Life, which is quite short actually, but then goes into In Death Is Death, which is much longer. And this is where the groove probably really comes out that I talk about.
Mm-hmm.
There's a riff in Death Is Death, which honestly, I don't care where I am, on the tube, the bus, high street, whatever. If I've got this on in my headphones, it's almost like I'd just lose consciousness of my surroundings and just headbang to the extent and likelihood of physical injury, really. And then I suppose, and then there's a social embarrassment, or rather lack of. Such is the groove, right? And anyone listening who knows the album will know what I mean. And again, that might only be one person, but Robin, you know what I mean, son. So yeah, and then there's another somewhat quiet section before we go into like the final bit, if you like. Even though they've had to segregate these into track 1, track 2, track 3 and give them names, it is one continuous piece, but you can still look at it as kind of sections because there are these quieter interludes which are necessary to break up the absolute brutality of what's going on elsewhere. If they hadn't done so, it would have probably been a little bit too much and pummeling, and it might have devalued or taken some of that brutality away or made it. I think that's why Strapping Young Lad's Alien, we're going off into other things now. I love Strapping Young Lad and Alien, but City is regarded as probably their best, even by Devin Townsend. And that's a long point I've made there very quickly that no one's going to understand as a result. But so In Death Is Death, and then yes, this final section, which starts with a track called Shed, which I think Shed was the track that they sort of released as the single, if you like, because they obviously had to do. Well, they had to put something out there as a preview of the album, and they went with Shed, and I can sort of understand why. It's catchy, but again, like most tracks on the album, it's very, very short. And then it just tears into the next track, Personae Non Gratae, if that's how you say it, which is kind of just, again, really, really catchy. And anyway, so this sort of this all builds and builds and builds and culminates in the final 2 tracks on the album, which are probably for me like the most fucking brutal. Well, just combined, if you like. No, even individually, they're both fucking brutal in different ways. I mean, initially in a track called Dehumanization, which even from a Sugar fans is kind of seen as like the most brutal and crushing thing they've ever done. For this riff, like the heaviest riff ever created in all of mankind, you know, which it may well be, to be honest. It may well be, but I'd rather kind of focus on the track that follows it, which is like the last on the album, and it's called Sum, as in S-U-M, Sum. And this has quite possibly my favorite moment on an album ever. Robin will know what I mean here, because I've poured out to him time and time again how this is basically like the best thing ever, and I think he sort of agrees that there's this crushing riff in Sum which kind of it brings everything to a close, and it's utter just ruination. Like, you know, there was was it, I think, Cult of Luna or something, where I was talking about like, oh, the end of the world, you know, asteroids crashing down. This is the soundtrack to that, you know. And this could be as well. But I mean, the thing is, it's not only the destruction of the riff itself, it's also got this kind of melody behind it, which actually brings some beauty into it as well. It's hard to describe, but it seems to have a profound like spiritual impact on me whenever I hear it. I almost somehow feel changed from listening to it. I mean, I've probably said many bold things during my depiction of this album, but they're all wholly justified. I mean, if you don't like metal, you'll probably find this album difficult because it's about as metal as it gets. But if you like me, you respect what I've said over the podcast to date, at least give this a bit of a listen. Give the track to Sum a listen so you can understand why I'm doting on it so much. Headphones in, full volume, and prepare for just the most epic thing ever, like Ruination, like I said. And I suppose that brings me to, I don't know what would be the track I'd recommend. I mean, I almost want to say I can't. I refuse to. It's one continuous piece, therefore listen to the whole thing, but no one will. So I think I don't know. I think In Death is Death is a good one because it's a bit of a showcase of what they're about. But ultimately, Some is like my favorite piece on the album, and yeah, quite possibly I know I've sort of talked about metal in the build up to the top 10, and believe it or not, this is the only metal album in the top 10. But this is possibly my favorite moment on an album, you know, in Some. I haven't got time, you know. It would be quicker for you to go off and listen to the whole album than listen to me try and convey how much I fucking love this album so much, and in particular Some. And I think every time I listen to this album, it would probably feature higher up on the list. And in fact, it did do, didn't it? It did do. But then I went off and listened to the album that like swapped back around with it again at number 5. So naturally, I look forward to getting to that. But that's kind of probably everything I could say about Catch 33, just to try and keep this podcast at a reasonable length.
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, again, we've talked before about, you know, I'm not really a massive metal guy myself, and I must admit there is an element of Meshuggah's songs sort of bleeding together for me in terms of I'm not really familiar with albums and stuff, but there's certain tracks I definitely recognise. Let's put it that way. And they've almost got like.
Can you name one?
Yeah, well, there's Millennium Black Cyanide is the one that always comes back to me. But there's
New Millennium Cyanide, Christ.
Oh yeah, there you go. Sorry.
But there's also Perpetual Black Second. I don't know if you bled the two there. Literally, they're on different albums though. But yeah, so gone.
Is Bleed a track or is that an album?
Yes, Bleed. Whilst we're talking about bleeding, Bleed is probably their most famous track. And I talked about Obson being like their most popular album. I think it's possibly largely because of Bleed, because that was like the single, and definitely of all the songs they've ever done, the one that's gone the most viral, the one that kind of typically YouTubers tend to use as the track to you know, X does Meshuggah, and you know, and then they put Bleed in, and it's just like, oh come on man, literally change the record. You know, pick a different Meshuggah track, and that's why I love the Marcel plays Meshuggah. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about. I like it when they just choose a different track, almost just out of left field, and it just works better as a result.
Well,
Bleed is a very pummeling and relentless track, and it's very fast and it's very technical, and it's about a good 7 minutes worth of. Yeah, I think Bleed is brilliant. Like, I am not for a second disparaging it or devaluing it. I think it's great. I understand why it's where it is, but that's Bleed, and that was the album that followed on the album.
You can have too much of a good thing, can't you?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, for me, what the only point I was really trying to make is that, you know, that there's some sort of metal, because I've heard from a couple of people that you have to almost like go through a process of tuning your ear.
Excuse me.
Because particularly with Meshuggah, I mean, so much of what is said in the lyrics, it just goes completely over my head. So it is almost like an entirely audio sensation to me.
You mean the subject matter of the lyrics, or do you mean that you can't actually hear what what
I can't actually make out words from most of it?
See, I think he's quite clear. He's very. I mean, he does nothing other than scream, really. But a bit like Michael, I think he can actually pronounce the words to a point where you can actually understand what's being said.
Yeah, that's probably the best I've found for being able to try. Even so, 90% of the lyrics, I can appreciate that they are English words for the most part. What that word is, I couldn't tell you. That's just me being honest. Fair enough. But yeah, in terms of, you know, I've heard plenty of metal, and you know, some of it I've liked and some of it I've not. But the thing that really impressed me with Meshuggah is how sort of individual they are. Do you know what I mean? Like I truly feel like they're a standalone band. Do you know what I mean? And the way they play with the time signatures, and how sort of you know, sort of, as you say, sort of relentless, mechanical, and grinding, but at the same time, it clearly shows a craft and an intelligence of the band doing it. And that's what sort of intrigues me, because I sometimes, you know, I'm guilty of sort of regarding really, really brutal metal as just sort of like an excuse to bang your brain through your skull. You know, that it's
Well,
not necessarily like a good time. It's just these people have almost like got Pavlonian conditioning to sort of go, oh, that's really brutal. I'm going to like smash my head about. Whereas
people. Sorry, go on.
no, I was going to say whereas with Meshuggah, even though obviously you're far more familiar with their work, there is, you know, definitely I know what you mean with sort of like a groove. There is sort of a melody to it, if I dare say it that. But you know, as opposed to just it being bang crash wallop scream scream murder, you know.
Well, people dismiss, or a lot of people dismiss like extreme metal as just being almost like juvenile and infantile, and it's not. You know, there's so much melody and artistry and complexity and stuff like that, and yeah, definitely intelligence with Meshuggah. I mean, we've not really talked too much about the band, really. We've just kind of talked about the album, of course, because you know that's why we're even talking about them in the first place, because this album is in my top 10. But yeah, they're polyrhythmic, I suppose is the technical term. So yeah, that naturally carries a lot of interesting time signatures and things like that. But yeah, they do have this groove, and also, as you say, they do have a lot of melody at times as well. Not all the time, but when they do, it really has more of an impact because they do it really, really well. They're beautiful when they want to be. But the second point to make is that they don't want to be most of the time.
Yeah.
And so that means when it does happen, it's all the more impacting because it's almost come out of nowhere and much more juxtaposed with the brutality.
Sorry, I always remember Gaz telling me about one of the music teachers. I forget who it was now, but you know, not a woman who would take kindly to the actual music, but having discussed with her the sort of the time signatures and the tuning patterns and all that sort of thing. And that she'd said, you know, I couldn't bear to listen to it myself, but actually musically it's quite interesting. And I was just like, oh, I really liked that she'd got at least an open enough mind for that.
Yeah, Meshuggah often get, I think, you know, brought up in music theory because they are very technical and complex and stuff, and also they play in heavily detuned 8-string guitars. Yeah, they have a very distinct sound, as you say. You know, they inadvertently and unintentionally gave birth to what is kind of known as djent, DJ, yeah, which is like, I mean, not that I dislike everything in the world of djent because some bands are great, but if you think of like Animals as Leaders, Tesseract, Periphery, they're probably 3 of the better ones, but I'm not a massive fan. I'm sorry, Meshuggah are the godfathers of this type of thing. No one, you know, fit to shine their boots or whatever, hold a candle to them.
Yes.
Meshuggah are just, like I say, the godfathers. We've spent quite a lot of time discussing Meshuggah there.
Yes.
Back to you, my good man. Your numero 5, per favore.
Sí. So my follow-up to possibly some of the most brutal music ever committed to the common CD is now followed up by the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack, and we're talking about the first Guardians of the Galaxy. The soundtrack for the second one is still great, but yeah. But
by the way, I'm not laughing at that, as Homer Simpson once said. I'm laughing towards it, just because I don't know. I just wasn't expecting it because I don't really know anything about it. I've not seen the films.
Well, you know, obviously, I have an affinity for all things Marvel, and I even actually remember saying to you, "Am I allowed to put this on?" Because I am aware that some people disparage the use of like film soundtracks. It's not truly like a collection of songs by one artist. Is it really an album? And it's something that I, you know, experienced time and time again as a complete album. And it is great. It got me through plenty of shifts when I was doing delivery driving. Just Pizza Hut and, I should probably say, can we say like
PH
place? Yeah, a pizza service.
I don't know. We've done enough product placement.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't particularly want to plug them. I work for them. I
think they're the best of the 3 main pizza chains you get in this country.
They are.
I'd put Domino's at number 3, Papa John's at number 2, and Pizza Hut at number 1.
Well, I've
Sorry
never
if that
had a Papa
offends anyone.
John's. Never
Uh,
had a Papa John's, but yeah, I just don't like Domino's as a company. But I have eaten there. I'm not saying that I haven't. So anyway, massive side swipe. So yeah, I've been doing delivery, and I'm a big fan of the film. The whole conceit of the film, well, not the whole. One of the main sort of core things is that Star-Lord's mother. I will have to give a spoiler here, but it's right at the start. She's got cancer and she passes away right at the start of the film.
and who's Star-Lord, by the way? Is that Chris Pratt's character? Is that?
Yeah, that's Chris Pratt's character. Yeah.
Okay,
The main character, as you would.
Because I
expect.
love Chris Pratt. I think of him as Andy Dwyer from Parks and Rec. You know, that's all I really think of him as. And obviously, what's his name? Chip. What's his name? Owen.
Chip.
I don't know where Chip came
Owen
from.
Grady.
Owen Grady
from Jurassic Park.
Yeah, Jurassic World. Yeah.
The Raptor Wrangler.
Yes.
It's not easy to say.
No.
Yeah, no.
That's how I
think
of him. Yeah, and I'm aware that he's in Guardians of the Galaxy, but I've never seen
it. Yeah, so his mum passes away, and one of the things that she does to sort of comfort him is she makes him a mixtape of her favorite songs, and sort of says, as long as you've got this tape, you can listen to it and think of me. And for the most point, it's a lot of sort of like 70s rock. And there are some sort of sweet songs in there as well. And the song that I'm going to recommend, if you haven't already heard it, is "Hooked on a Feeling" by Blue Swede, which it's just a ridiculous song. It's the one that starts the "Ooka chaka, ooka 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 chaka."
Never heard of it.
And yeah, it's just I was just about to say something incredibly posh sounding, and I'm going to now fulfill that. It's a jolly good time is what it is. It was my own personal carpool karaoke for many months.
After this
belting the songs out.
After this podcast takes off, that'll be on the back of the album I was in HMV. Was it Jolly Good Time, Lost Beach? Yeah.
A ruddy roaring good time. You've got the Jackson 5 and David Bowie, Moon Age Daydream. I'm an alligator. I'm a mama, papa coming for you. Great stuff. Yeah. So as you can see, it's an album that I wouldn't say it means a lot to me in terms of like it's not an introspective album that I'm going to put on and really sort of soul search and find myself to. Like I say, it's attached itself to me. There are so many times where day's starting to drag a little bit, CD on, bosh, off we go. The next hour or so is just a happy blur. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I actually I don't feel like I need to talk too much about it, because it's a collection of funky songs. It's brought together. It's so well woven into Guardians itself, the film. And I always thought it was really interesting that like he'd got a parcel, and the last thing that his mum does is give him this little package, literally as her like hand drifts away as she passes. And he was so sort of affected by this that he hadn't opened it for sort of 15 odd years. And at the end of the first film, I don't care. I'm already gone this far. These are spoilers. Sorry. He finally feels like he's almost like earned the right, that he's got to that point in himself where he can sort of accept it and move on. And he opens the package, and it's a new cassette. And that's the other thing as well. It's a little bit of a sort of a retro wink and a nod, as they're off in space in these highly advanced sort of like spaceships, and he's worked somehow a cassette deck into the ship's sort of like onboard computer, so he can constantly listen to this music. And it's another really cool cassette from his mom, and it's all her favorite songs and songs that to sort of think of her and listen, and sort of almost like bringing them closer despite the fact that she's gone. I always thought that was a really lovely touch. I really enjoyed Guardians. It's it's a really unique film, and I think definitely this sort of jukebox of classic tunes definitely helps it along and gives it its own sort of like quirky signature. And I guess you don't really have a lot to say in this on this topic, Scott. But I'd be
Well,
interested to see what you make of it so far.
what can I say? Right. Well, I mean, it's a compilation, obviously different artists. That's
Yes.
not to say that sort of thing, shouldn't appear in a top 10. Why not? And also, I mean, like when Alan Partridge was asked what his favorite Beatles album was, and he was like, possibly the best of the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
I think I need to see the film, I think, before I listen to the soundtrack.
Yeah, possibly.
But I mean, also, this will sound again somewhat disparaging, but it's not. I mean, when I think about Guardians of the Galaxy, because I'm just not massively into that type of film, but I am massively into like theme parks. Epcot in Walt Disney World, Florida, are building currently a Guardians of the Galaxy like spinning coaster type thing, and I've been all over that. But nothing to do with Guardians of the Galaxy as a franchise, but just what are they doing with this coaster? How are they theming it? What sort of technology is going on? That sort of thing. This is where my total nerdiness comes out. I'll go on a website.
I almost had forgotten about your Chris Pratt sort of fanboyness, because he's very much the central character in a group of the Guardians.
Oh, Loz, I will. Well, I don't need to confess this to you because you already know, but to you, the listeners, I will quite happily confess to having like a bit of a man crush on Chris Pratt, because he's just got such a vibe, and he's funny. He's naturally really funny, particularly in Parks and Recreation with Andy Dwyer. He's brilliant in that. But he just seems like
for me, it's Chris Hemsworth. That's all I'm going to say.
What, as man crush sort of thing?
Yeah, if I could swap bodies with anyone, Chris Hemsworth, definitely.
If I could swap personalities with anyone, it might be Chris Pratt or indeed or Paul Rudd. Same thing there. I guess because Paul Rudd's naturally funny. Anything he does is funny. Someone's funny if they can just walk out on stage and that somehow is naturally funny. And Chris Pratt, I think, would have that. Paul Rudd, but I'd say Bob Mortimer would as well. I only recently found out who Chris Hemsworth was. I'd never even heard of him until about a month ago.
Oh, yeah.
And no, again, this is going off road, but yeah, Stephen Wilson did a music video where he did deep fakes, and his face kept changing with other people. And Chris Hemsworth was one of the faces I didn't recognize. I was like, who the hell is that? And then someone was like, oh yeah, he's the guy who was married to Miley Cyrus for like 5 minutes.
Oh no, that's Liam. Liam Hemsworth.
Oh, okay.
Chris is the brother. I can see where you've gone there, but just to bring us back to reality.
Well, I guess without again wishing to be insulting, my kind of love and respect for the two has meant that I didn't know which one was which.
Because Chris Hemsworth plays Thor, you see.
Oh, well,
so it's not just why I like him, but not far off.
Okay, well, yeah, I yeah. So, God,
yes.
where were we before? Well, yeah, I mean that's probably. I'm afraid that's all I can probably offer in terms of reaction to this. That sort of off-roadership, as I like to call it.
That's all right. I almost did want to sort of throw you a curveball and just see literally what your first reactions were, because I knew you hadn't seen the film. I know you've definitely not heard the soundtrack. I don't think you need to have watched the film to, it is literally a compilation of songs, most of them sort of 70s era. Yeah, okay. I say era sort of
era. What?
Normally.
Era. What?
Yeah. I say that normally, and both you and Mum have both been like, yeah, it's era. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to rewire my brain just to suit either of you. So suck it and see. If that's the most offensive thing that I say to you today, consider yourself lucky. Do you know what I mean?
Consider yourself outnumbered. Me and Cheryl have got you there. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry I'm sorry to name Loz's mum on this podcast as well. I do apologise.
I was going to say you leave big shares out of this.
But one thing maybe I could say here is that, like, sorry, totally unrelated to the last 20 seconds worth of broadcasting.
Good news.
Is that I love the fact you've put a soundtrack in here, like unashamedly, like a collection of different artists, and naturally as a result, I want to see the film. I wouldn't if I just listened to it, it wouldn't make sense. I mean, look, again, this is going slightly off road, and this is also how I, again, seem to be outside the law, seemingly, with these podcasts, because I'm now quickly going to just shoehorn something in here. None of my top 10 are sort of soundtracks, but if push came to shove and I had to name a favourite soundtrack, do you know what I'd go for, Lars? You haven't seen the film, so I would imagine not.
Yeah, in that case, you might as well carry on, bud.
Dumb and Dumber. Yeah, it's got a fantastic soundtrack, and anyone who's seen the film will know what I mean. It's got bangers on it. This track with Mary Moon, like it just, not that that's even particularly the standout one. It's just the one that came to mind first. There's goodness knows how many songs of this album, and indeed in the film, that are just perfectly placed and give it quite. I mean, Crash Test Dummies. I mean, the track is called which, yeah, I know you can't really say that comfortably, can you? Yes, I'd like to. I'm just checking if you've got the latest single in stock by Crash Test Dummies. Oh, certainly. What's it called? It's called But yeah,
they'd call for an orderly to come and take you back to the mental asylum.
Yeah, quite. Which, believe it or not, is the start of Dumb and Dumber 2. But no, Crash Test Dummies. Anyone who's heard the song and seen the film will know what I mean. It's anthemic. Good. So I'm afraid that's my input to just steer it towards Dumb and Dumber. Sorry, Loz. I'll have to watch Guardians of the Galaxy. In fact, is that one that you've named in this Marvel series for me?
It is not. It's not on your path to Endgame.
Right.
But it's definitely one that I would recommend outside. It's just obviously I'm trying to, because I know it's not massively your thing. I'm trying to, chop it down to the bare bones of what you need to get the most out of the finale. And as much as it's a great little film and a really sort of fun and unique sort of spirit to it almost, yeah, it wasn't necessarily vital. But yeah, no, as far as I'm concerned, regardless of the film or not, this album, it's in its entirety, it just brings me pure joy. And I can't really say better than that. That is high praise.
It is high praise, man. Yeah, given how much I know and I love you and your opinions, then that's just made me want to. Can we shoehorn this into this path to Endgame, as you call it? I know it's going to push this Scott Loz Marvel series into the double figures, possibly. But or maybe I'll just go off and watch it on my own. But I'd kind of like to watch it in some order.
Yeah. Okay. We'll take that on board.
Well, if nothing else, as I've said and confessed to now, I have a bit of a man crush on Chris Pratt. So if the film is crap, I'll still kind of enjoy it if he's just being Chris Pratt.
It's not crap.
All right, cool.
Scott Loz Show. I do like that. Right, okay.
Over to my numero cinque, as I said, I think.
Indeed. And what breaks the top 5 for you, old squire?
Well, like I say, it was so hard to choose between this and its predecessor, number 6, Meshuggah's Catch 33. This again is an album which is like its own concept, if you like, and indeed its own world. I think really all the albums coming up are kind of like their own world, and that's why I love them so much. Almost where like one of those albums where the music tells a story on its own, like without the lyrics, And this is a band I've mentioned before, actually, possibly back in I think maybe the day one of the Festival of Mentions. I think this band came up
back in the good old days.
Yeah, because they were a band I really wanted to talk about, but I kind of knew that only one of their albums would feature here. And it's a band that precious few have really heard of, and it's my favorite prog band of all time. And again, one of the great English bands of all time. We talked about sort of Pink Floyd and Radiohead being up there. These guys absolutely are as well. Gentle Giant. Yeah. And I suppose before I name the album, I should say that it's taken a long time for this album to become my favorite of theirs. Some 10 years, I'd say. Like when I first started really getting into this band, I kind of ignored this record, if I'm honest. Nothing really stood out as an absolute sort of banger of a track. Unlike the albums, say Freehand maybe, or Power and the Glory, In a Glass House, kind of more accessible, I suppose. and absolutely up there, with this as the potential best. But no, this is the album that is, for me, has arrived some 10 years later as my favorite thing they've ever done. And it's an earlier album than all of those I've just mentioned. It's called Three Friends. And so, yeah, basically, over the years, as I continue to listen to this band here and there, and there are sort of times when no other band will do. You just want the rockiness and like silliness that really only they can offer, I'd say. I'd maybe give this album, Three Friends, a spin here and there. I always recognised that it was a proper concept record. And I'll get to the concept in a minute because it's beautifully sort of simple and original. But just musically, yeah, whenever I played it, I guess, I always listened to more or less the whole thing in order, because even back then, that's what really made it shine. Everything in context, it had to be heard as a whole, being the greater than the sum of its parts. So, yeah, the concept is basically about, maybe hence the album title, three friends, like three childhood best friends who were inseparable. But as they sort of left school, they kind of just totally went their separate ways in life. One became essentially like a manual labor worker, one a business executive, I guess, white collar office worker, and the other like an artist. So three very different lines of work and professions, if you like, and careers forged. But it would appear from the lyrics that none of them are actually truly contented. And the final track kind of leaves things on a bit of a cliffhanger as to whether they ever reunite or anything. But I suppose like Cadet with this one, I feel like I should do just a quick run through of each track because, well, for one, there's only 6 tracks on it. But also as I do so, it'll become apparent why I think so highly of this these days, I would imagine. So the album, much like this music series we've done in the podcast, starts with Prologue, which really just kind of sets things up. And actually, it was a happy accident that I called that episode Prologue. I wasn't thinking of this album when I did. But yeah, there's this lovely like double riff thing going on during the verse, which it's hard to describe. None of us have got time. But it took me a lot of time to appreciate. I love Prologue now when I hear it. But then the second track, School Days. Now, this is unsurprisingly about their time together at school. And weirdly, like I almost hated this song when I first heard it 10 plus years ago, because it just sounded weird, even by their standards, like bizarrely tracked kind of harmonic vocals and silly little riffs and like flourishes on the drums and stuff. But then it kind of transitions into this haunting dark section and back again. And like, I think now with maybe a wiser head on my shoulders, I can see what they were doing. And, I struggle to believe I ever couldn't. But then, hey, that's just a rite of passage, isn't it? And growing up and learning and getting to know an album and growing to love it like I did with this.
Sure.
And like I said, the music itself is telling the story, really, before the lyrics do. There is this unashamedly weird and sort of like chipper exuberance and excitement going on of like early school days. The very carefree vibe. And then it kind of gives way to this ominous brooding, I don't know, almost like the weight of the world starting to take over. And this transition is done so simply, just with this really long and slow crossfade. It's almost like they've faded 2 songs together, but it works perfectly. It just works. And yeah, to be honest, the middle section of School Days is one of my favorite things they've ever done now. Right. But like back then I hated it. Well, maybe not hated it, but just didn't get it. Didn't particularly like it. And yeah, for anyone that's heard the song I'm on about, I'm probably not, I would imagine, but that's cool. But I guess I'm kind of thinking in particular about this section. Dad, if you're listening, you've heard this album many times. And there's this section kind of with these really 2 haunting piano chords. And just like, remember, like it probably sounds silly when I sing it like that because I'm not capable of singing it as well as I think. I don't know if it's Kerry Minere or anyway. I don't know. I don't know who sings that bit. They had 3 vocalists at the time, but yeah, it's this is. I mean, it sounds silly when I'm trying to do that cover there, but it's not silly in the song. It's quite haunting. And just a quick final word on this song. I talked about, like association memory. And weirdly,
Yes.
whenever I hear this album, and particularly this song, it takes me back to a very specific time. Playing like this Harry Potter game on the PS2, I think it was. Ironic, I guess, because I was probably at sixth form at the time. And also walking around Hogwarts, within the game, of course, and listening to School Days, from this album. But yeah, I've got really strong memories of playing that game and hearing this song. But anyway, to move forwards, we get into kind of the three songs that represent, like I say, where each of these people ended up in their careers. Starting with Working All Day. Like the vocals and the riff have this kind of repetition, a bit like sort of like, hi ho, it's off to work we go. Yeah, it's got that sort of like. What was that? That was Seven Dwarfs, wasn't it?
Seven Dwarfs, yeah.
Yeah.
I was about to say, you don't need to be a dwarf to appreciate that.
No. And you'd know what I mean if you heard Working All Day. It's very much got that kind of vibe of just like, I'm getting on with it and this is how it is and I don't know otherwise. But anyway, he's clearly not happy from the lyrics themselves. And then this kind of, again, to try and skip forward a bit, this leads into the next track, which is called Peel the Paint, which is definitely one of the immediate album highlights when you first hear it. And you can almost immediately feel that something epic is coming in this song because it's got what sounds like plucked violin strings and just the way he's singing. There's something ominous about it. Talk about heaviness. Not too long later, there is like a heavy breakdown, if you like, both in the song, but definitely like a mental breakdown from the character's point of view as well. And it's in the lyrics, of course. And also, if you're talking about the lyrics, there is like an allegory about peel the paint, because it does sound like this artist has just snapped and sort of started ripping up one of his own works to shreds, but similarly, introspectively making a statement about his own makeup and peeling back the paint and seeing what's underneath. And it's got a very, like I say, it's heavy, it's got a very notable riff, a proper riff, Like, I don't think I've dated any of these albums. About when we did films, we were like, well, this came out in 1994. I don't think we've given the year of any of these albums, but I think this was about 1972 or 3 or something like that. Again, seminal year, Exorcist. That was one of my top films, wasn't it?
Was.
But yeah, I was talking about like Peel the Paint having this riff in it. And back in the 70s, you had these bands like sort of Zeppelin and Sabbath, where it was all about them riffs, yo. And this is most...
Jesus Christ. Sorry. I wasn't expecting you to go so street on me.
Well. So, this track has got most definitely a riff in it, and you'll know what I mean if you hear it. And it's kind of not just a guitar riff, but it's done with, I think, a saxophone, or I don't know, actually. And then there's an epic guitar solo as well. This was the track all those years ago that I could probably listen to out of context of the rest of the record, just to kind of hear this section and rock out a bit. But no, once again, it works beautifully in context, much more so. And then, the penultimate track on the album is called Mr. Class and Quality, which, if you haven't guessed, that kind of focuses on the third protagonist, if you like, who went into this high-level executive office work. And this is quite a funky piece of music, to be fair. This one bounces along at a good pace, and I think it's meant to have this kind of false pretense of everything's great, but then once again, the lyrics definitely say otherwise. And again, for the sake of time, I'll skip forward, but it's a great piece. To bring this album to a conclusion in epic fashion, it just, Mr. Class and Quality, the previous one, when it's kind of said its piece, if you like, just almost out of nowhere, just launches into the final track on the album. It's quite much is said about the transition, actually, between these two tracks, because it sort of doesn't work and it does at the same time. It just launches into it. The title track, Three Friends, that closes this album, it's probably my favorite piece of music they've ever done. It's the perfect way. It's the perfect way to bring this record to a close. And to be honest with you, I don't know if this album would make my top 10, without this song rounding it off, because of how perfect it makes the whole thing.
Wow.
I know that kind of sounds contradictory to what I said about the bigger picture and the whole being greater than the sum of its parts and all that. But no, this kind of exists outside of that in a way. And with this one, the music especially shines. it's a swirl of just choir, vocals, guitar, like organ, Hammond organ. It's so ethereal. It's almost a song you could imagine hearing when you're dying, you know, because your soul leaves your body. You'll know what I mean if you hear it. It totally feels like how that might be, you know, that the stereotypical kind of light at the end of the tunnel that one apparently sees in that situation. I definitely think it's the best song they've ever written. But again, it took me many years to come to that realization. And so, like, sort of now, you know, in summary, when I listen back to this album, I think this is head and shoulders above the rest. You know, how could I ever think otherwise? But like I say, you know, it's just taken me a long time for me to piece maybe the lyrics together and fully appreciate maybe some of the music that for so long just kind of sounded a bit almost boring and ungratifying compared to some of their other albums. And as such, it's not the album to introduce someone to Gentle Giant with, I'd say. But my God, if you become a fan of this band, I mean, like me, you know, perhaps years down the line, you'll go through the same journey I did with this album. And here it is now in my top 5. And also, I suppose this just came to me. We talk about albums that have a certain magic about them. You know, you genuinely feel you're listening to something that's had like magic sprinkled over it. Deloused was one of them, wasn't it, by the Mars Volta? I'd say Catch 33 is another. Sing to God by Cardiacs would probably be another as well. But this, perhaps more so than any of those, has this element of that sprinkled over it. And as such, it kind of just hits me on a really deep personal level when I listen to it and takes me somewhere, takes me back to times in my life. But it's almost like it knows I've gone through those experiences and it's written these songs for me, you know? So like when I listen to it, it sweeps me back so viscerally to like times in my past.
Sure.
Yeah, it's hard to describe it. It's just like I say, you know, if I went off tonight and listened to Catch 33, I'd be like, oh, what have I done? Catch 33 should have been number 5. But then if I went off and then listened to Three Friends, I'd be like, no. Three Friends, number 5. And so, yeah, Three Friends, number 5 in summary. Yeah.
Now, I was going to say, just to try and give us a window, because I know they're not the most sort of popular of bands. You know, I was speaking about sort of, you know, where listening to the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack and sort of driving around and sort of singing my heart out. And I know we've sort of talked about a time and a place for certain albums beforehand. What I'm interested in is where you would say, what's the time and a place for this? I mean, I know you sort of said like on your deathbed, but perhaps something a little less macabre than that.
The time and the place is for playing Harry Potter on the PS2. Yeah, whatever that game was called. No, I don't know, because it's so dependent on outside factors other than just like the time of the, yeah. I mean, you put me on the spot and I'll answer it. I think the time and the place is when you're at home, preferably on your own, comfy chair, maybe, you know, half a bottle of wine down, that sort of vibe. Yeah, and just good headphones and just no outside distraction whatsoever, because it's a story, it's a musical journey. It's like I say, it's not only a concept album in terms of its conception and the story being told, but also musically it's a journey and a story in and of itself. And I think the thing is, the time and the place for listening to this album are very different for me now than what it was when I first heard it. When I first heard it, I was a bit kind of unenamored with it, if such a word exists. You know, I was a bit like, this isn't doing for me what other Gentle Giant tracks and albums have done. And it's taken 10 years to just work its magic and get through to me fully. So
it's a properly like introspective experience then to get the best out of it.
Yeah. So I mean, I suppose my advice to the listener would be to go off for 10 years and listen to it repeatedly and then report back to me.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at your opinion there, and I shouldn't be, but you know.
That's right.
10 years seems a little excessive.
Well, it's necessary, I think, for it to. I'm going to sneeze again, or am I? Oh God! You know when you're when you're in limbo with a sneeze, and it doesn't matter what you do, you can't stop it. You can pitch your nose as I'm doing here because I'm not talking like this.
You'd got to snee. We're just waiting for the. Zuh!
No, I think it's gone. I think that actually worked for once. Anyway, Gentle Giant, Three Friends. Scott Hughes is number 5, deservedly so. Masterpiece. Yeah,
Okay, well, almost guiltily, I'm afraid I have very little to offer in reply.
Quite all right, old chap.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to tap out on that one, mate. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Well, look, I did start making a list, didn't I, of albums, and this has got to be one we listen to together. So I'll add it to the list. I haven't got my notepad to hand, but I'll add it to the list, and we shall listen to it then.
I'm sure somewhat during the editing process you'll hear this audio again, at least once, surely.
Yes.
Surely. I was half expecting you to say, "Don't call me Shirley," then. Right. Okay.
No, overrated film, Airplane. I'm sorry. Had its moments, but not that funny. I'm sorry.
I've got a love for Leslie Nielsen, which allows me to enjoy projects that perhaps I wouldn't otherwise. Let's put it that way.
Airplane 2 had the funniest moment in the whole series for me, which was when he walks up, because that one, of course, was set in space, wasn't it? With the Airplane 2.
Yeah, much less vivid memories of it, but yes, I've seen it.
I don't want to spoil the joke, but just search like Airplane 2 door scene, I guess you'd call it.
just watch all of Airplane 2.
But then, no, but my point is that like most of it's just not worth watching.
Yeah.
I'm so ambivalent, is that the word? Like when it comes to spoofs, just Hot Shots Part 2 was amazing in places, shit in others.
Yeah. It's like The Naked Gun. Do you know what I mean? I'm sorry. There's great amounts of that, which are really great sort of that sort of as you say, spoofy genre. You've got to love The Naked Gun, surely.
I quite like The Naked Gun for the same reasons. And funnily enough, not another teen movie, believe it or not, is actually a spoof that really delivers on laughs, and I would say deserves to be kind of considered up there with those works. Scary Movie's got its moments. They've all got their moments.
Well, there's good spoofs and there's bad spoofs. I mean, like you only need to look at the tail end of the Scary Movie franchise to see a bad spoof.
I think I've
and yeah, I mean,
which one's 2?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's 2, isn't it? In the house.
That's 2, yeah. Because I think 3 is when you've got Leslie Nielsen playing the president and Ja Rule his bodyguard.
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
How the hell did we get back to Ja Rule? What the fuck?
All roads lead to Ja Rule, Loz. I thought you'd know that, of all people.
No, they don't. They really don't. Murder. Yeah.
Right, give me your number 4, for Christ's sake.
I was going to say,
because I really want to hear it. Well, that's the sole reason, really. I just really want to hear it.
Yeah.
But also, right. we've got to try and keep this under 3 hours.
Okay. Well, this is an album that actually I don't intend to spend a massive amount of time on, just because, funnily enough, it's an album that you've already covered.
Oh, okay.
Not in full length, but certainly in part of our discussion so far, and that is Opeth with Blackwater Park.
Yeah, I feigned surprise when I went, oh, okay. But then, of course, immediately I realised, yes, okay, I know what he's talking about now.
Now, obviously, I don't think I could have been your friend in the time period of which I was without sort of sucking in a love for Opeth through osmosis. I mean, I've got a regard for many, sort of bands and artists that you've put my way in one way or another. But Opeth really were the ones that I was just like, oh yeah, right, okay. I thought you were like laughing then.
No, what is going on with my breathing today? I'm hiccuping, coughing. I'm so sorry.
They were the ones that I was properly just like, right, okay. If I was going to, spend a lot of money and go a long way to go and watch someone of a lot of the bands that you play me, Opeth would be the very top of that tree.
I did spend a lot of money to go and see Opeth live, and in particular this album, because at the Royal Albert Hall, no less, they played this album in its entirety, and it was a fantastic experience. I can't remember how much I talked about this when we were talking about Opeth before, but it's my probably joint favourite album, I'd say, of theirs.
Yeah.
And if of the 2, I'm glad Blackwater Park was the one I saw live. Because every song's a masterpiece, and there were particular songs on there that I really wanted to see live.
Yes.
That they hadn't done before. So Yeah, amazing.
Well, as I say, you'd given me a couple of compilation CDs that you'd done yourself of various Opeth tracks from throughout their discography. But in sort of trying to explore myself their own albums, Black Waterpark's the one that sort of comes alive to me as like a full album. There's certain bits from certain albums I'm just like, that track's amazing, but perhaps not all of it is exactly to my taste. And I mean, without obviously going through in quite the detail that we had before, I mean, the Leper Affinity, great song. Harvest,
what a way to start an album. And also, we were late getting to the gig as well, so we missed the start of Leper Affinity.
Oh,
yeah, I know.
What are you like?
Yeah, I can't remember why we were late. I like to think it wasn't my fault, but yeah, and yes, oh yeah, and then into Bleak and just just every song on this album.
Well, that's it. I mean, for me, even without hearing it, I'm instantly recognised Harvest, The Drapery Falls, Funeral Portrait, Patterns in the Ivy, and Blackwater Park, all straight off the bat. And there is not really a lot of other Opeth albums that I could do that with. So think, as a whole collection, that's why it's got the nod here. I think a collection of songs together.
The reason I wanted to see it live so much in its entirety, because of course it is an album that flows just like you're saying, two of the most underrated. I think there are tracks on this album that are overrated as much as I love them, but two that are underrated, criminally underrated, you could say,
clink.
Are clink clink, because it's the Funeral Portrait and Dirge for November. I think it's the other way around, actually. I think it's Dirge for November that goes into the Funeral Portrait.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I can't believe I can't remember. I think it's Dirge for November.
I'm looking at the track listings now. So, yeah, Dirge for November is 5 and the Funeral Portrait is number 6.
Yeah. And and then that goes into Patterns in the Ivy. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, when we talked about this before, I was aware at the time. In fact, this was the only spoiler, if you like, I was given at the time as to what was coming up.
Yes.
So as a result, I probably ensured to gloss over it a little bit to allow us a little bit more freedom to talk about it here without repeating ourselves potentially. And also, likewise, when I recorded some little guitar riffs and stuck them in, I probably avoided this album on the whole. I think I seem to remember putting one in from the Funeral Portrait.
Yeah, and I think I remember you putting Patterns in the Ivy as well in, because obviously I shouted it out because I love that.
Yeah, I'll find something else off this album to stick in here because what an album!
It's funny because I remember I think didn't I send you a video of the Drapery Falls the other day, and you were like, actually of all these I think it's is it the Drapery Falls that you think is slightly overrated?
I really like the Drapery Falls, but yeah, it seems to be commonly seen as like the not centerpiece, but like, the first track people think of, and it's one of the last I think of, and that's not to disparage it in any way because it's still a masterpiece. Every song on this album is brilliant. But
well, for me, I had a really enjoyable little moment because, as I say, I'd probably heard a lot in the background being around you for a large period of time. But I remember having a wry smile watching one of the live DVDs with you, where Michael's sort of like, "Oh, we're going to play this next song, and I hope you like it." I think a few people quite like it. Anyway, it's called The Drapery Falls. And I just, as I say, it was the first proper moment where I was just like, I'm a fan of this band, because as soon as he said I don't know why, I was like, Drapery Falls. Do you know what I mean? I was just like, yes. Even though the Leper Affinity is a banging tune.
And the Funeral Portrait.
Yeah, well, exactly.
My favorite of the three,
was one of the first times where I was properly just like, I was excited to see it as well. Do you know what I mean? I was just like, yes.
Well,
And,
when we saw them live, doing this whole album, interestingly, he didn't talk between, because as we said before, he is naturally a bit of a joker and loves his
yeah,
slightly, not well. No, I don't want to call it stand-up comedy because there's nothing rehearsed about it.
yeah.
He's just being himself and pissing about, frankly, between songs. Passing the time whilst people are tuning up or down or whatever. And he just likes to talk, and he's funny, But during Blackwater Park, he didn't say a word between the songs, and he made a point of that, and it kind of dawned on us after about 3 tracks that oh, okay, he's not going to say anything, that they're just going to let it play in full, without any break. And he walked up to the mic at one point and then kind of took a breath and then walked away as if to play up to the fact. And got a laugh. But then they came out and played another set of other tracks off each other album, and that was when the typical Michael Ackerfeld bants that we know and love kind of came out. So I'm glad that they recognize. They don't seem to consider. I think that there's a touch of because it is unquestionably their breakthrough album, and probably the most famous, probably the most popular. I think Michael Ackerfeld, when he talks about it, is I don't quite understand why that one shines above the others or more brightly than the others. And part of me thinks is that really what you think, or is there an element of like Fleetwood Mac almost refused to acknowledge Rumours as their best album, even though it is. And they will defend Tusk to the hilt, which is a somewhat messy kind of convoluted follow-up, which I still really like, but sorry, as good as Tusk is, it's not as good as Rumours. And I don't know what Michael Ackerfeld's favorite album is that Opeth had done. I think Sorceress he was a big fan of, which I'm not, gotta be honest. I like some of their other later stuff, but Pale Communion, we talked about this, didn't we?
Oh, yeah.
Massively my highlight of the new era. And but I think he I'm sorry, I don't want to walk off down other avenues again, but I know Michael said that he's very proud of Still Life, and he thinks that was I don't know how I came up with that at the time. But Blackwater Park, I think because of such was the magnitude of it for them, and I think there's almost an element of vanity coming into it again. Well, I don't necessarily think Blackwater Park's better than any of the others, but there you go. Whereas I do think it deserves to be considered better than pretty much all of the others. It's amazing. It's an amazing album.
Yeah. Well, I say, I remember speaking before about almost sort of having a need to be able to relate to an artist or a band, certainly the people in it. And Michael's definitely one of those. He's a real personality, and I just think that there's not quite so many of the people that I enjoy the music of that I just like to sit down and have a beer and just have a bit of a chin wag. Do you know what I mean? Just shoot the breeze, as they would say.
Yeah, Michael Ackerfeld would be one of my dinner party guests. Certainly if you're talking musically as well. I think I mentioned Drew Goddard of Carnival. He'd be one of my.
Well, let's halt this right now, because that actually sounds to me like a really fun idea for a one-off podcast. So pop that in your back pocket, and you loyal listeners out there, if you like the sound of that, let us know, because that might well be trickling your way.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great idea. And I suppose I wouldn't have gone on to try and painstakingly, think of the others now, because I wouldn't have been able to do so anyway. I suppose I was thinking solely musically. And
I just like being bossy as well. So,
I like it. It's a great idea. Yeah. And I think whilst we're on this little topic, when we've concluded the music series, which we're one episode away from doing now, I think we should, because I really want to do the top TV shows with you at some point in the same format, because I think we're probably a fan of more shows. It would make sense to save that for down the line and go off and do something a bit different for a while. Do you agree?
Yeah.
But we'll do that, but we'll do some episodes. I know we talked about doing one on mental health, which I think would be really good. We'll do one.
Definitely.
We'll do at least one on sport as well, because I think that'd be fun. We talked about doing some video ones.
Yes.
Where we go through some of our favorite possessions.
And that's where we unveil to the world that we are nudists.
Yeah.
We now need to continue the expedition towards the North Pole which is your number 4.
Chip, chip, chow. Yes, well, I've been looking forward to talking about this one, just like all the others. Now, I'm not going to go into every individual track on this album, but once again, I must say that they all kind of work as a whole and like give this album a cohesion, really, which, let me tell you, it needs, because this is one of the craziest bands that's ever existed, right up there with, I'd say, maybe like Cardiacs, but more wonderfully warped than them, to be honest. This is a band called Mr. Bungle I'm talking about. And for anyone that's listening that knows this band and knows me, they probably know which album I'm going to talk about here. A bit like Carnival, like these guys have only properly released 3 albums over a long period of time, each of which are very different. I mean, you have like the self-titled debut, which, if I'm being honest, I rarely listen to, if ever. It's got its moments, but it's not the band I adore to like this level. Then their second album came along, which is most people's favorite, I'd say. And again, I can understand why. It's a masterpiece. It's called Disco Volante. Definitely features some of, if not the best of their material. It's like, it's heavy, it's jazzy, it's ridiculously groovy and funky at times. There's a secret song on the album with what sounds like Grandpa Simpson. For anyone who's never heard Mr. Bungle before, I would go away and search like Mr. Bungle's secret song or something like that on YouTube and then come back. And honestly, if that track doesn't make you smile, it could be quite possible that there's something really quite seriously wrong with you if you didn't like that track. Book an appointment somewhere. Anyway, so that's Disco Volante. Now onto their follow-up, and indeed the magnum opus and the album which I want to talk about, which is called California, and has always been my personal favorite of theirs. And well, I love it so much, it's number 4. Now, whereas Disco Volante was like quite abrasive and almost schizophrenic, and I mean, perhaps more immediately accessible, to be honest. I know that probably doesn't make sense, but trust me, it is probably their most successful album. California finds them somehow even weirder and even darker, but at the same time, almost somehow more cohesive and just well written and structured and flowing. It sounds like a complete album that like ebbs and flows almost sensibly despite the madness. And as I say, it's called California, the album, and the first 30 seconds or so of the first track, Sweet Charity, will immediately make you feel like you're in California. You'll know exactly what I mean if you hear it. If you close your eyes, it's kind of very lush. It'll whisk you right to Malibu Beach or what's the other one? Santa Monica. They're the 2 famous ones, aren't they? Right, and then things get crazy. A bit like other albums I've mentioned before. This album kind of ebbs and flows, like I said. And when we get to the first track, when we get to the third track, Retro Vertigo, after the craziness of the second track, which I've skipped over largely for time and just because there's a lot of songs on this album, it kind of brings us down just when we need it. And it's a beautiful piece of music. California is definitely their most beautiful record, and this is one of the highlights in that respect. And I can't mention Mr. Bungle without mentioning Mike Patton. His voice really shines in particular on this song. He's got unquestionably one of the most diverse and beautiful voices of all time. And he's got such range in his voice as well. He can do virtually anything. Here's a case in point, or 2 actually. For any gamers out there, have you played the game Left 4 Dead, Loz?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, Mike Patton voiced all of the zombies in that. Like, if you hear a zombie in that game, you're hearing Mike Patton. And he was also in Portal, like the final boss in the first Portal, GLaDOS. He lends his vocals not to GLaDOS, but to this like snarling red kind of like orb that's part of the. You'll know what I mean if you play it again. I don't want to go too far down that road. But yeah, so he's got an amazing voice, and this song in particular finds him sort of flexing his operatic muscles, if you like, and it's beautiful.
It is interesting that he's quite a distinctive and I would say a divisive figure, but you obviously clearly really associate with him, but it's not obvious. I wouldn't say he's certainly not a mainstream artist, let's put it that way.
No, but I think unquestionably his voice. Anyone could listen to him. He's got again just a voice to die for. If I could sing, I would. I thought about Ian Kenny of Carnival. Like I'd kill to have his voice. I think Mike Patton especially. And I'm sure many others out there would agree with me. He's got such range and power. On YouTube, there's just like a series for everything nowadays, isn't there? And there's a couple that I've seen down the years of like voice coach reacts to, and then it could be like one that seems to come up time and time again is Devin Townsend. He's got an amazing voice. But I'd love to watch some like vocal coaches, react to Mike Patton, because he's just got an amazing voice. And sorry, like I was going to say, Ace, if you're listening, I know you love the track Vertigo, or Retro Vertigo rather, and so do I. The chorus is stunning. And also, actually, Dad, if you're listening, if I may address my father directly for a moment again, it was
denied.
I know this album has been somewhat of an amusing topic down the years. Almost your reluctance, Dad, to recognise or listen to an album that I hold this highly in regard. Take Radiohead, for example. You're a huge fan of In Rainbows, but then perhaps more unwilling to acknowledge Kid A in their discography, largely because of how much I bang on about it. The same applies for An Absentia by Porcupine Tree. I know that one day you'll get that one, I think. Perhaps on your deathbed. A bit like Citizen
It's a jolly
Kane.
thought.
Well, Citizen Kane. Rosebud. Mate, perhaps, Dad, you will utter the words, In Absentia. Anyway, yeah, like you say, in the interest of keeping it light. Please, Dad, please finally give this album a listen. I've nagged on about it so many times. I know you love the craziness of the likes of, I don't know, say Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, or even Gentle Giant. You're not adverse to things getting weird and crazy, but I feel you've always resisted this album purely on the basis that I love it so much. And it's caused this reticence to want to love it yourself. Don't pass up the opportunity to hear something really special, which I know you'd love in places, if not all of it. Tracks like Retro Vertigo are reasons why you should hear it, and I know you'll thank me down the line. I don't care how begrudging it is. In fact, that would just make it even sweeter, really. So there you go. Sorry, I've addressed my father there. So let's get back on point. After Retro Vertigo, here are two reasons why Dad probably wouldn't like most of this album. Because we go into full-blown bedlam for 2 tracks here, starting with one of the album highlights, if not the album highlight for me, which is called Air Conditioned Nightmare. A wonderful piece of music, weird and wonderful. And then, if you thought that was weird, mate, we go into Ars Moriendi, which, if that's how you pronounce it. Oh God, how can I put this? Imagine a bar mitzvah where someone slips some crack into the water supply.
I don't think I can. I'm sorry.
Listen to the second half of this song and you'll know exactly what I mean. I remember once there was a house party, someone from school and I can't remember who, and a bunch of us turned up without crack, it must be said. But we did put this song on full whack and just sort of danced around like lunatics and just almost took over, And I think it almost split the party in two, because there were a group of people what the is this and who the are they? But then there were as many others who were yes, this is what tonight needed. It literally tore up the dance floor. But what did I say was so good about this album, Loz? It's that they knew when to bring it back down again, and the ebbs and the flows and all of that, and what I said, the whole thing. And so now, like I say, I'm not going to go into every track on this album, but I guess these ones in succession are important to kind of break down a little bit, because now we're about to go into, for me, the most beautiful piece of music they've ever written. This for me would be the unquestionable album highlight. Again, a bit like Three Friends, I think this album wouldn't be anywhere near as high up this list if this song wasn't on it and didn't exist in indeed this exact place on the album. Pink Cigarette. Which you might have heard, Loz, because it's of all the Mr. Bungle tracks, this is probably my favourite. So I'm sure at some point down the years, this would have been one that I played to you. And it's almost a power ballad. And again, I'd say a showcase for the ability of Mike Patton's voice. It's incredible. It's got a very tragic story behind it, which I won't go into, but just musically, it just sends shivers up my spine, and particularly the second half of the song, which kind of builds up to the end. It's genuinely one of the best songs ever written, I think.
Wow.
And all the more impacting because it's come from a band that are carnage. Right?
Yes.
And going back to that, because that is largely what this band are like. I mean, I'll save description of the rest of the album, really, because I think I've given you a reasonable idea of how this sort of album plays out. And it does continue in much the same fashion. It's all over the place, but cohesive at the same time. And I'm not going to continue saying that because I've said it a few times now. In fact, maybe I do have to continue saying that because I've got to kind of enforce that that's the case. These are one of those bands who, in 2 minutes of the first half of a song, have come up with more ideas than most bands do in their entire career. I mean, just let's skip ahead.
A bold comment.
Yeah, but it's so true. And just listen to maybe the final track, "Goodbye Sober Day," because like you said with, I think, was it Fear and Loathing? You won't feel sober after this. It's absolute carnage, but still not without its beautiful moments too. But I guess it's kind of the entire album summed up in one song, and a fitting way to end it. It genuinely feels like a religious experience if you have your earphones in and no distraction, and it has your full attention. And I suppose while we're on the subject or the idea of sobriety, as is the name of the song, it's important to say that I don't think this band ever did drugs. I mean, if you listen to it, the album, you'd be understood for thinking that they were just wasted throughout, and that all of these songs were conceived during acid trips or whatever. But the truth is that Mike Patton, at least, certainly never took drugs. That includes alcohol. I think all he ever admitted to liking and abusing was caffeine. In fact, you might be familiar with one of Mike Patton's other bands, Faith No More, who were much more famous. Well, they had a song called Caffeine, which was partly to do with that. Now, these guys weren't really into drugs. And this just shows for many people that the brain does not need drugs in order to be fertile to this crazy extent. Frank Zappa was another person who famously didn't touch drugs at all. And his music was just as diverse and weird and sort of wonderful.
I am amazed that Mr. Bungle have not tried drugs, though, to be honest.
But
especially Mike Patton.
I know, but then Vic and Bob, they like to drink, but you might watch some of their sketches and think, oh, this could only possibly come up with. No, they're just capable of feeling and doing everything they want. Without
certainly, I'm not suggesting that it would be better if they had, but you would say, particularly with a band like Mr. Bungle, that almost sort of defies categorization. And it's so sort of zany at times that the mania almost it either sort of says to me, sort of points towards sort of either mental illness or sort of quite a severe cocaine binge.
I don't know. I mean, look, my experience of cocaine is that it calms you down. Yes, it might have you up all night and kind of a bit fidgety or whatever, but I think it sort of calms the brain down in a weird way. I can totally understand how a brain could come up with an album like California without any chemical influence. In fact, I do wonder what they'd be like if they did, take all of these things that we associate so many albums with. I think it would have detracted from it. It would have derailed it potentially.
Well, maybe they got their, the experience that somebody might get from drugs from the music itself.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, these days music is my tonic for sure, and if I wanted to get crazy, to quote Bernie Mac for a minute, like California would be arguably the first album I think of, because it's just crazy. It's madness. It's all sorts of things. And but yeah, and also a reason I think that drugs would have just not made an album like this possible is because this is a very complex technical album with musicianship skills off the charts, and just I just don't think they could have probably done it if they'd have been wasted. I really don't. And also the production is incredible. We've not really dated any of these records. This album came out in 1999. Around the time I think technology had sort of moved on to the point where albums could sound this sort of crisp compared to before. The next album coming up is one, we'll talk about the production a little bit, I guess. But so, I mean, production does play a part, but as long as it suits the music itself, none of these albums are here solely for their production, obviously, or at least I would hope that's obvious. But in cases like California, and like I say, the one that's coming up, number 3 in particular, I must get a mention for just being about as good as it gets. So I suppose, I should try and reach a summary here. And again, what's like the introduction, if you like, the song to start with, the recommendation. I don't know on this album. I mean, I sort of want to say Pink Cigarette because it's my favorite, but that won't give you an idea of what they're all about fully, I would say my other favorite on the album, Air Conditioned Nightmare. As long as you listen to all of it, you'll get a good sense of what they're about. And it has that Californianess about it as well, which I was talking about. Or if you really want to hear Mr. Bungle at their craziest, listen to Goodbye Sober Day. No, don't. No, yeah, you should listen to the rest of the album before getting to that. If you really want to hear Mr. Bungle at their craziest, then just go off and listen to something of Disco Volante, maybe. Not this album. I know that sounds crazy, but
to quote Bernie Mac.
Bernie Mac yet again, yeah. But yeah, the Secret Song by Mr. Bungle is a great example. And even if you don't like it, you'll be like, well, I'm glad I've heard that.
Yeah, it's another experience band for sure.
Yes. And I think I've probably said as much as I can there on that album. I love it so much.
I mean, for me, I find it difficult to speak specifically about California, because I really haven't heard it, but Mr. Bungle is such an odd band for me, and I have to say it's not a band that I've delved deep into enough to really take seriously, because from the outside looking in, it is so bizarre at points, and it is manic, like I say. It does the album that I think I'm more familiar with, whether that's actually the album Mr. Bungle, is like almost like in Fear and Loathing, where they go to the carnival all messed up on ether, and they're just sort of like staggering around, and that's that. It's sort of like the carnival from hell, some sort of demonic sort of, as I say, staggering experience.
Well, Mr. Bungle's debut album has that kind of carnival vibe.
Yeah. As I say, for me, they're a real enigma. I am aware of Faith No More, not really so much in terms of I am aware of them as a band more than I am really able to talk at any length of their work. But I as you can tell, I don't really have a lot to say, I'm afraid, again. But they're I'm glad I'm aware of who they are, and I can certainly, I think all things have a time and a place, and quite exactly what the time and the place for Mr. Bungle is, I'm not 100% sure myself. But as I say, I'm very glad that I've been exposed to them, if nothing else.
I think it's the time and the place would be the same as I'd probably propose for any other album in this top 10, as I just did with it was Three Friends, wasn't it?
Yes.
To just comfy chair, couple of drinks, whatever your drink of choice is. I know I've kind of spoken to people about Mr. Bungle before, in particular friends of mine who are Mr. Bungle fans, most of which tend to prefer Disco Volante. I think that seems to be the common consensus, that Disco Volante was like the masterpiece. Whereas for me, I love it. It is arguably them at their best in terms of like just individual moments and stuff like that. But I love the notion of bands who can be that crazy to exercise it in a way that's cohesive and to bring it together. And that's what this album does. And so there we go. California. Number 4. And I think we've kind of got to end this podcast there, haven't we? And what I will say before we sort of wrap this up, just to look ahead, if you like, to what's to come, my top 3 are absolutely unequivocally the top 3, light years above anything else, and almost have been since I first heard any of them. So naturally, I'm excited to get to them. because they are like I say, just absolutely the podium, you know. So I'm really looking forward to that. But equally, yeah, you know, I'm quite satisfied with this long chat we've had here, and quite tired as a result. And I'm going to go off and get something to eat and just chill, you know.
Yeah, it's been good. We've sort of lurched from one almost extreme to the next, but certainly in the contrast against one another.
Yeah, it's been a very diverse selection. So yeah, what more to say? Thank you all for listening, as always. And
Indeed.
Yeah, the next one's going to be an epic, as the film one was, you know.
Oh yes.
Well, they're all epic, I like to think, but I'm sorry, we're talking top 3 albums here. That's epic. I'm afraid that is epic.
Yeah, I'm really excited about my top 3. Solid works.
Without you know, spoiling it, Loz, have you got any idea what are in my top 3?
No, actually, no, not a clue.
Okay. Well, I've actually sort of inadvertently said what one of them is many podcasts ago. But...
I was going to say, I assume one of them is going to be from Radiohead, but
no, there's no more Radiohead to come. In fact, in this podcast, I said that Radiohead were the only band that occupied 2 of my top 10, and we've already spoken about those 2. So,
I do apologise, old chap.
No, Radiohead don't.
Well, there you go. That goes to show I literally have no effing clue.
And you literally don't listen to what I'm saying, you prick.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well,
you know.
Nah, I fucking love you, mate. I fucking love you.
Yeah, I love you, mate.
Share those. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to you, Loz, and thank you to everyone, especially to everyone listening as well. And go off and listen to some of these songs we've proposed, or better still, the whole album. Perhaps you'll become a new fan. If so, let us know somehow. Because at the moment, there's no official channel for this podcast, is there?
No.
Well, I suppose there's YouTube, actually. I suppose you could let us know on YouTube. But no, just go off, do your thing. You do you, yeah? And I'll do me, and Loz will do Loz. And as such, we will reconvene, most excitingly, very soon for the top 3 albums.
Oh, I'm really genuinely intrigued as to what the hell you're going to come up with next. And that's what the next episode will be.
Yeah, well, yes.
All right then.
All right then.
Chip, chip, chow.